الساعة. Again, there's an ikhtilaf from this ayah also. This is from the signs of the hour. When he becomes older, then he will talk. And the second person is Jurayj. Now he is from the children of Israel. And the third is a young who is breastfeeding. He sees two people and he makes statements about this. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll start with Jurayj. If I feel I've gone over 10 minutes, I'll stop there, and next week we'll continue with the other two people. So the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, Ya Jurayj, when his mom approaches him, فَأَتَتْ أُمُّهُ وَهُوَ يُصَلِّي, when he was praying. Now remember, this is Bani Israel, this is not us. فَقَالَتْ يَا Jurayj, when he is praying, so Jurayj himself, he responds by saying, Ya Rabbi Ummi wa Salati, Oh my Lord, my prayer and my mom. So he's confused, should I respond to my mom, or should I continue on with my prayer? And many of you, I'm sure you've had a situation, maybe your wife is called, or maybe the husband is calling the wife, and you may be praying your nafil, or your witr or something, and you're in a state of confusion, or it disturbs you in your salah. So here, again she calls him the second time, فَأَقْبَلَ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِ, he continues upon the salah, and he mentions فَانْصَرَفَتْ, until she goes away. فَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي الْغَدْ, the same thing happens tomorrow. فَأَتَتْهُ وَهُوَ يُصَلِّي فَقَالَتْ, and she says the same thing. She calls him out, and he makes the same statement, Ya Rabbi Salati, and he mentions about his mother and the prayer. Now he does not answer for the second day. The third day, the same thing happens. فَقَالَتْ, this time she makes a dua, obviously not praising him. And once I mention dua, and I'll mention about the ruling in terms of what the comments of the scholars. Allahumma, she makes a dua, لا تمته حتى ينظر إلى وجوه مومسات. She makes a dua and she says, do not let him die until he seizes the faces. I mean, someone who's into fahisha, I think you guys can guess what kind of person, until he sees these people. Now the first part, we spoke about him ignoring the call of his mother. So if, let's say, one of our father or mother had to call, the scholars, they comment, if you are praying your fariḍah, in this case, you will continue praying. When it comes to the nawafil, you can't break your salah. So that means obviously your mom has more rights over you, and your father, they have more rights over you. Unless it is a faraid, that's when you have more strictness when it comes to this. But when it comes to the nawafil, you can answer your father or your mother. So this is the first part of the hadith. Now the second part is that she makes dua against him. Now this dua does come into action. There is a fitna that Jurayj goes through. Now he's an abid, he's someone who used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So upon every single one of us, there's always a difference between an abid and an alim. An alim, he worships with knowledge, and he's steadfast. As an abid, as someone who's a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he may do a lot of dhikr and all those things, but shaitan may also trick him. So we always seek the refuge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from shaitan. So this is one of the things that the scholars also point out. Now what is this fitna that Jurayj had actually faced? Here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us, كانت امرأة بغي. Now there was a prostitute, a lady who used to obviously commit zina. Now in another narration, she goes to the people of Israel, Bani Israel, and she mentions that she's going to put him under a trial. She approaches him and she says, in ship, she tells the people, if you wish, I will put him to test. And she's going to put him to a test. And she does approach, فَتَعَرَّتْ لَهُ. She approaches him. Now he does not give her any consideration. Obviously this is a big fitna for some women to approach you, and he does not give her any sort of attention. One of the things that he used to do, that he used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a high place. In the mountains, sometimes they would build something out of sand, and they would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was amongst those people who used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this high place. So there was a shepherd, Ra'i. Once he actually says no, she goes to the shepherd and she calls him, and he falls into this act. So Jurayj himself, he says no, and the shepherd, he says yes, and he commits zina. So we seek refuge, that we don't have some sort of trial. It is not from the sunnah to actually ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for trial, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we are faced with something, that He makes it easy upon us. This is one. Now here what happens is when she comes, and what happened was with the people, she comes and she makes a claim that it was Jurayj who committed zina with me. Now this is a big claim. Now the people, when they approach him, they started beating him. In fact, they destroyed this house of worship that he had built upon himself. They beat him up. They obviously gave him a very difficult time. So what does he do? When he asks them, he says one of the things, he's like, give me time, let me do wudu, and let me pray. So he prays, he does wudu. And one of the things you want to point out is, he does not get angry on these people. He does not ask, why me? Why is this happening to me? But he is patient upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala befalls upon him. So if you and I, when we are faced with a fitna, the question you and I have to ask is, do we do wudu and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is one. Now when he does so, there is a miracle that happens. Once he's done with the prayer, he approaches this young baby, and he strikes him on his stomach, and he asks him, Man abuka? Who is your father? And here the baby replies saying, Fulanun ra'i. This mentions the name. You don't know the name in the hadith, it just says Fulan, the shepherd. On hearing this, the people, يُقَبِّلُونَهُ, they kiss him, وَيَمَسُّونَهُ, they actually touch him, thinking that it is blessing. عَلَى كُلِّ حَالٍ, they ask for forgiveness, and they tell him, we will build for you a house that is place of worship in gold this time. But he says no, that he will be happy with something just out of mud and clay. Now the Prophet ﷺ, subhanAllah, why does he tell us this? If you have to just take the story of Jurayj, is that the patience that Jurayj showed upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when at this time of fitna had befallen him. The other one is the trust he had in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you and I, when we face difficulties, are constant. I've heard this from people so many times. Why hasn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered my dua? Why isn't He answering my dua? So a reminder, inshallah ta'ala, is, brothers, in the end, we're all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't mind, I want to mention the second part of the hadith, so there is not a cut, if you guys don't mind.
Go ahead.
Jazakallah. The second part of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions of a person where a lady was breastfeeding a small sabi, again, a young boy, a baby, you want to call, and a man passes by, بَيْنَ السَّبِيِّ يَرْضَعُ مِنْ أُمِّهِ, and she was breastfeeding this boy. فَمَرَّ رَجُلٌ رَاكِبٌ, a man passes by, he's riding upon the horse. There's a dua. Sometimes we see a fancy car, you get amazed, and sometimes you make statements like, oh, I wish I had this. You wish that you could be like this guy in terms of wealth. So his mother, she makes a dua, he makes the dua for her. What is the dua that she makes is, اجعل ابني مثل هذا, make my son like this person. Now you're not going to expect anything from a baby to respond, but the miracle, karama, the word you want to use, the miracle in the English language is that the boy actually stops breastfeeding. He tells his own mother, لا تجعلني مثل هذا, do not make me like this person. This is one. A lady passes by, al-ama, and a slave lady. The people are accusing her of zina. So today, subhanAllah, Imam Rashid, he mentioned an ayah that the people who accuse the muhsanat, the women who are chaste of zina, they will have the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their tongues will witness against them on the day of judgment. So they actually accused this lady of two things, that she stole, saraqat, and zaniyat, and she actually committed zina. But the statements that were coming out of her mouth, hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakeel. Enough for me is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the disposer of our affairs. And we find this just before the Battle of the Trench, the Sahaba also made a similar statement, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made a similar statement. Yani to have patience at the toughest of times, and it is not going to be easy when a community is accusing you of this crime. Now, the mother seeing all of this, she makes a dua to not make my son like this. While he is breastfeeding, the same thing happens. He stops breastfeeding and he says, "Ij'alni mithlaha." Make me like her. Obviously, this is a very strange thing because she's being accused of zina. She's being accused of stealing things. So here, the mother asks, "Why did you actually make the statement?" Now, two things he mentions, inshallah, to summarize everything. He mentions the first person was a jabbar, was a tyrant, mutakabbir, that he was someone who was arrogant. And I mentioned many times the people of Jannah, one of their qualities is their mutakabbir. And the people of Al-Jannah is mutada'af. In the eyes of the people, they are nothing. But in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they may have the highest ranks. First he points out, this is somebody who is arrogant. As for the other lady, she was actually innocent, but she was being accused of committing zina and of stealing. And many of you know the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was accused of, again, zina. Then what happens with him? He is in prison. What we find from him is patience upon this fitna. So from all these stories, brothers, we want to make sure we hold our tongues. When we deal with people, we will deal with what is apparent. We will continue. Obviously, your job is not to assume what is in the heart, but in reality, it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who may know the reality of the situation. So before accusing anyone of anything, we want to find out the truth. Just like how the ayah was recited today, that their tongues will bear witness against them on the day of Qiyamah. So we want to make sure we preserve our tongues from accusing others or even blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? This is one of the qualities of shaitan is فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. He accused Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of you. Because of you, I actually fell into this. So brothers, be like Adam alayhi salam who said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. O Lord, if you do not have mercy upon us, and if you do not forgive us, we will be amongst those people who are the losers. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us like Adam alayhi salam and his wife. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وجزاكم الله خيرا.